lives. As an artist collaboration, we've given shape and depth to some of the most complicated topics of our time, making them easily accessible for those who seek to understand. We've given voice and space to the stories that often go ignored. Please take a moment to consider being a patron, make a donation, or join Rockfin. Thank you. Oh, wow, that was fast.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. I just told Julie to get ready, and then it came up. I was like, suddenly we're here. Welcome to another edition of Pullquote.
Right. And we're very excited over today's guest.
Today, we're welcoming back our friend Paul Cudenec from Winter Oak. Paul is a longtime English journalist and community activist who 8 years ago went off to live in the French countryside and write books about anarchist metaphysics while exposing climate capitalists and denouncing the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Great Reset via the Winter Oak website. And this was written a year ago, so I imagine 9 years ago he left for France.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
He's the author of Fascism Rebranded, Exposing the Great Reset, an ebook that's recently been translated into French and Spanish and is being currently repackaged and released to the public. And his most recent book, The Withway, which is available for free as a PDF on the Winter Oak website.
Mm-hmm.
Paul releases a lot of his work through Winter Oak and his blog, The Acorn, which can be found online. His latest Acorn piece is Empire of Hypocrisy, and we're going to talk about that a little bit along with his books later in the conversation. We've been inspired by his writings ever since, and we've been very happy to welcome back to Pullquote Paul Cudenec. And hello, Paul. How are you?
Hello to both of you. Fine, thank you.
Good.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for coming back and talking to us again about your latest pieces. I know that you have gained in popularity on Twitter over the last year or so since we first met you. So I want to congratulate you on that. I think people are very responsive to your messaging, and I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thanks.
Yeah. The idea of bringing forth, what's been talked about. I've been looking at your your organic radicals, and seeing the term industrial capitalism come up often, and you use that a lot too. And industrialization and in your latest, The Acorn, you feature a new organic radical, and her name just escapes me. But she said something about, when you talk about industrialization or industry, whether it's capitalist or communism, it encompasses the idea of modernism.
Yeah.
Being modern. And, this is something that, I have embraced my entire life because I was born into it. And then I, born into the propaganda of, modern equals good and progress equals good. And, all the things that I feel like I am and like this, living in cities and all the things that I love are of that. And come to find out that it's like, these are the things that are actually destroying us in the long run.
yeah.
Yeah. And, it's made to feel we're made to think that it's quite normal, all of this modernity, that it's just something that was inevitably going to happen as part of the sort of the evolution of the human species, almost. That
right.
There's no
Right.
Yeah, and even down to like that image that you'll see now and then of like the evolution of the human. From, like being a monkey to crawling to being sort of like stooped over to standing up straight. And then, you'll often see somebody, at the end, like in a suit and a tie or carrying a bicycle or, doing whatever, something modern,
Right.
Yes, wearing a virtual reality helmet.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the most frightening thing, I think, of all.
Right.
Yeah.
Should have given Nevermore a shot.
Oh yeah, well, so we're I mentioned in the intro your book, The Withway, but also Fascism Rebranded, and let me bring that up. Our friend Crow from Nevermore Media has taken the trouble to translate. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, he's had all of the essays in that book translated into French and Spanish, and the other people at Nevermore have been busily trying to spread the word about the contents and popularize it. I suppose the book in particularly on your side of the Atlantic. So I'm really grateful for that. They've been really supportive and enthusiastic. And, so I think most of the essays, if not all, are now available on the Nevermore Media site. So.
That's great.
Is amazing. I love this collaboration.
Yeah, I do too.
It's wonderful.
Crow is supportive of us as well, and he's also a supporter financial supporter too. So he's contributed to our work as well.
He's pretty special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just making a note here because I want to make sure that we put the Nevermore Media website in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. So tell us the Fascism Rebranded. I that came out last year, and I remember we were talking about that a little bit. Can you kind of give us a thumbnail again of like what it encompasses, what it's about?
Well, I suppose it's based around the Great Reset, as they call it, which to me was just a way that we became very aware of an agenda that has been brewing for a very long time, and suddenly sort of broke above the surface of the water of what appeared to be democracy. But I mean, the book actually the essays start before Great Reset, because some of us, including you, were into a almost a post-democratic era where they're no longer even pretending to be what they used to pretend to be. So there's a sort of echo of it. There's an echo of it and stuff that I was writing before 2020, and then we get the reaction to what was happening, and the Klaus Schwab epic that I wrote in October 2020. That was probably one of the longest. It's probably the longest thing I've put online, apart from books, But,
I remember reading that and wondering, when will it end?
Right.
But also, it's the most clicked on article. Whether people have actually read the whole thing, I don't know.
Oh, people do. Yeah, people have, and people do for sure. So, what did you want to move on to?
Yeah, well, we can talk. So you just released the Withway, and so when did you just put it out, or how long? February. Okay.
It's February.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, this is going back to it's a mixture actually of what I was writing before all this Great Reset stuff happened, and my comments on the Great Reset, because it's sort of trying to bring together the more philosophical elements of what I say and apply that to the contemporary situation. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Then the title. Tell us a little bit about.
Well, the Withway, it's a word that I've made up, obviously, but the word withness does exist already. It's, I think English speakers will know what it means roughly, intuitively perhaps. So the Withway is the way that our society could take in order to rediscover withness, and so withness, I'll sort of discuss it on several levels. It's a sort of belonging to, but a horizontal belonging to, I suppose, being part of and being the same thing as, and interacting with, and being in some symbiosis with. So, for example, with the place where we live, and I quote some writers who've looked at that how landscapes are influenced by people who that what sort of food can be grown and how culture with which is obviously very important, and that feeds back into the original classical anarchist idea of solidarity and mutual aid and so on. And also our witness with nature, which is beyond just the landscape, but with nature as a whole. The fact that we are part of living nature, and I'll look a bit about the way that a lot of our religious and spiritual beliefs relate to animals and plants as well, and trees and so on.
Yeah,
which is something I also explored in The Green One, a book I read a few years ago. And finally, I suppose the ultimate level of witness is with the universe as a whole, which is the metaphysical level of what I'm saying. And the overall message is that I think that's the key to all the rest. Once we understand that we are not separate, atomized little individuals leading completely separate little selfish lives, and that we are just temporary manifestations of the whole. That changes the way we look at everything else, all the other layers of witness and belonging, and it also gives us courage, because if we think that our inner essence isn't something individual that is going to disappear in a puff of smoke the moment that we die, then we're more committed to using our presence here in the here and now in order for the greater good of human species. And so that has always been a motivating try to start revolutions and overturn dictatorships and free people, is that they've got something that goes beyond their immediate everyday personal concerns that motivates them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're sort of lost in the modern age because we're all so cynical and don't believe in these organized religions, which have proved to be, traps and
right, and
ways in which power is exerted and so on. So we're
right.
very aware of that. But I think we can rediscover an old spirituality that we've lost, but rediscover it in a new way.
I agree, and it seems like a lot of the organized religions have, especially in the Christian realm, have gone out of their way to take away that original spirituality and denigrate it to some degree to move people away from it, and it, even to the point of changing behavior, redefining morality in different terms that may even be related to like a capitalist point of view rather than a more religious point of view or spiritual point of view. And I feel like that's been going on for a long time.
Yes.
Did we freeze up?
Are we frozen?
We're having a little bit of connectivity issues that might resolve themselves in the recording.
I'd just like to read a little something from your introduction to the Withway, which really resonated with me, and it goes along with what you said earlier about how we are not, these individual atomized people just living our selfish little lives. Let me know if you can hear me okay.
I can hear you in a moment. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just read what you wrote. The separation today between those who support systems narrative and those who challenge it simply does not follow the left-right divide. Another way of seeing the current situation is in terms of people versus power as below versus above. Well, this is true as a kind of shorthand, which I have myself often used it does not provide us with the whole picture of what we are facing. The with way is an attempt to identify the deeper issues at stake and point at a different way of seeing the civilizational choices with which we are being collectively presented. So that really does sort of sum it up, in my opinion. You know, it's difficult to not fall into that left-right paradigm, right? I find myself falling into it frequently, almost every day, where I consider myself, you know, a leftist, anti-establishment, anti-political engagement. You know, I don't vote. I don't believe in those hierarchical systems, right? Which I know that fundamentally that's what, you know, that's where we stand, but that also closes off us from experiencing other people's, you know, input and understanding about the way their world works and their worldview. I'm just trying to be more open. And I think that that's something that is that something that you feel that you're trying to convey with the with way as well, is an openness?
Yes, yeah, because I think we're the language that we've been used to, the left, right, have but people have such different understandings of the same terms. You notice, if you say something, what people think is communism. I mean, I'm not a communist, and I'm not in favour of state communism.
Right.
But when people see corporate rule by bodies like the World Economic Forum and call it communism, that was very difficult for me to understand to start with. But gradually, I've come to see what they're getting at, and there's something they don't like there, which they've previously associated with communism, and which so they now use the label communism to describe any sort of totalitarian global system which puts in which the state steals all the rights of individuals and so on. So to them, it's communism. But I mean, so I don't think it's helpful, and we could spend all day saying, no, it's not, it's it's fascism, no, it's capitalism, it's feudalism. We've had these sort of conversations with people on Twitter. If you fundamentally seem to agree with people, we seem to be we're certainly against the same system. And often I find, it turns out people have a similar sort of vision of what sort of future they would like, a decentralized future of people living in, close communities, sort of self-governing communities close to the land. And, we've got to find a different way of saying this rather than just carrying on in this game of ping pong of which terminology is the right one.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I've even heard people who are opposed to all the totalitarianism, use the term collectivism as being problematic as well, because they think that is strictly communism. And oftentimes to an American audience, I will say yes, except that you have to think about the Amish culture as being collective as well. And so they are they are anti-state, they are independent. They do follow certain rules and regulations within the context of, governance here in Pennsylvania, especially. But, they are collective and independent, or, groups of people living in small communities working together. Yeah. And then people seem to get it because they have that context, or they have an example that they can turn to, albeit, highly religious and very conservative, you do have that, and it helps me convey that idea to other people of what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, there's a top down. If you think that collectivism always comes from the top down, then you're not going to like collectivism. But if you know that it could be a way of describing people, as you say, working and living together in a community, So again, it's the label, not the reality. It's
Right.
that is the problem, I think. It's the use that people have read lots of articles and literature using this term in a bad way. So every time they see it evoked, they think that it's that same bad meaning behind it, rather than that there's a possibility of a good meaning.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too. It's like even though the Amish, I believe, have some hierarchical system within their culture, they do come out of the same sort of roots that modern anarchists have come out, or classical anarchism comes out of, in the Anabaptist movements of in early Europe. So I always found that fascinating. Once I found that out, that there's this lineage that goes on there.
Yeah. Yes.
So I also wanted to mention just briefly to you, and I wanted to say this in the beginning, but I'm going to go ahead and say it now. When this whole thing happened, over 2 years ago, now almost 3 years ago, your website was a lifeboat for so many people who had been what they always thought was on the right side of history. And then they realized that their entire political ideation or their worldview was completely turned upside down as they watched their comrades, fall into this false narrative and this fraud. And so your website and your work was it literally, I've had people say to me it was like life, it was like breathing life. And so I really wanted to acknowledge that, how important and instrumental you personally have been in pushing past these false ideas about where we are and getting to those healthier places. I feel like I'm tripping over my words a little bit, but I think I've conveyed that. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, it's made a huge difference. It made a huge difference to Julie and me. At the beginning of all this too, it's like we saw our comrades in the Bay Area just taking this stuff hook, line, and sinker, and realizing that we were on the outside looking in and feeling very weird and didn't understand what was happening. Right. And started finding your work, and it was like, okay, all right, we're good. We have some people we can relate to and talk to, and who are reshaping or reimagining or positioning what where we've been and where we're going, and it was very useful. So thank you. Again, that's another thank you for your work and your.
Well, because from my point of view, it was in hearing what people like you were saying, and others, that reassured me, because I felt that I was, for a while, I felt like I was completely on my own.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's Well, thank you. That's really. I love hearing that. So thank you. That we do appreciate that as well.
And what's cool is that there's been an evolution of your work, an evolution of your writing. We also feel like we've evolved beyond certain narratives that we were sharing. And it's really time to get back to those simple horizontal connections in order to thrive and not just survive in this new world, but really thrive and operate completely outside of the capitalist structure that's been presented to us and keeps getting reinvented and represented to us practically on a daily basis. So your latest piece that you wrote has been really popular. Do you have anything you want to say about it? Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah, I can do that.
Your latest piece is called Empire of Hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really liked about this piece is how you presented it. And I hope you don't take offense to this, but the way you presented it was almost like reading a court document, like an indictment against this empire of hypocrisy that we've been dealing with for, much longer than 2020, but we certainly saw it accelerated after COVID was, marketed to us. So I wanted to, say that if you haven't read it yet, to our audience, please do read this.
Read it, yeah. It's and I like how you set it up in the context of the Commonwealth, which I've known about but never knew a lot about, and so I liked getting that perspective as well.
Right. Yeah, it was just packed full of really good intel, and so we do have a lot of followers that they want facts. They want, this equals this, and they want to see those connections, and they want to follow sort of the domino effect, right? And see who's at the end of this game. And so, it feels like this piece really kind of went there.
So what inspired you to bring it into that context?
Well, I suppose I started looking at the Commonwealth. It was through Charles as well, his Prince Charles, who's there's the previous article I wrote was focused on him, but it became clear that one article wasn't going to cover all of the whole question of the Commonwealth and its existence. I mean, it was a journey of discovery for me, really, because being English, I've heard about the Commonwealth the whole of my life, and it didn't really strike me as being particularly relevant in the modern world. I think at a certain stage it seems that the American empire seems to be the one that is the dominant force. I thought that the baton had been passed, at the end of the Second World War, but it's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's very difficult to discern what the interests are behind both the Commonwealth and the American empire. But I think there is a uniting force there. There is a force which manifests itself. It manifests itself in many different institutions and organizations, and the Commonwealth seems to be more central than I would have imagined.
And I liked how you put it. I think you brought this up too when we were talking. I liked how you contextualized it in terms of turning. Oh God, how did you put it? It was a really great turn of phrase where you said something like, they turned freedom back over to people who were being, governed, and they were asking for their own oppression, or something along those lines.
Yeah. I think that was a quote from somebody, wasn't it?
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Oh, yeah, it was a quote. Anyway,
Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. Okay. So you broke this piece down into 6 parts, and so there's various commentary and statements and phrases that I wanted to pick up on. So I'm going to go ahead and let you do part 1.
Okay.
While I.
Okay. Part 1, you described the various tentacles of the Commonwealth as nice imperialists. So that was on that first, the first link there, the nice imperialists, and the duplicity seemed to come to a head as you remind your readers the 2003 declaration in which the Commonwealth leaders committed themselves to strengthen development and democracy through partnerships for peace and prosperity. That sounds nice. And so, and I, and you said that sounds nice. And, one of the things that I liked was, you talked about how, the alliteration was there, and it's like, these are things we've always heard as Americans, like prosperity and peace. And it's like, they don't, they sound good together, but they're not really, they don't really connect to each other.
Right. So I wanted to bring that up, and then you mentioned.
Well, can you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh no, I missed the last bit on the alliteration thing.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, we're still experiencing the connectivity issue. So let me rephrase. So, this is something that we've heard as Americans: prosperity and peace always being linked together, and giving us the excuse, and I'm sure the Commonwealth too, to go out and do whatever it is they want to do to another country, in order to push forth peace and prosperity throughout the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always that, isn't it? It's just become so predictable. just all our lives, we've just heard these terms which have no relation with the reality. But I mean, George Orwell was onto that back with 1984, wasn't he? Because that was exactly the rest of it. So which just makes me think that it's long. It predates the second half of the 20th century and all the U.S. imperialism that we saw.
Right.
It was of something that was already. That's what struck me. It must have already long been part of the British imperial technique, was to pretend that it's something nice. I mean, that's what we were always told. Obviously, as British, we're not citizens in Britain. We're subjects. We're subjects.
Right. Just like in the United States. Oh, I'm sorry. Just like in the United States, we're not citizens. We're consumers.
Now we're consumers, right?
We're just consumers.
Well, I've even surmised that I've been told that the United States was founded as a military fiscal state,
a fiscal military
state, right? I've even surmised it. The United States is being created as a spin-off corporation of the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
That the independence. I even think that the independence movement was just a show, sort of this is our release party, and this is a new corporation that's part of the United Kingdom.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Sometimes it does look a bit like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wild concept, but I mean, I don't know. Given what we know about what's been taking place lately, it feels like it's not too far-fetched.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
We have a lot of followers who are diehard constitutionalists, and they lift up the founding fathers of the United States. And it's because we don't have any heroes. We kind of bristle and at this idea that the United States was, founded for freedom and all this, when we really just think it was an outpost for another military operation and for the bourgeoisie to come in and, create their own wealth without having to pay it back to the crown, So kind of these rebellious free market types who are still very capitalist in nature. So anyway, I wanted to just put that out there because it sounds a little cynical, but that's where we come from. We're unlike most Americans, we're just not buying the United States was founded as the land of the free and democracy. We're just not buying it, not when we follow the funding for it, there was, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're just not buying it. But back to your article, one of the things that you mentioned in the article that caught my eye, it was actually a term. And, I'd never really heard it before. I suppose I knew of it sort of anecdotally, but I'd never actually heard the phrase pro-poor development. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, there's this phrase that was used by somebody in the Commonwealth organisations that I mean, development is always been always presented as being something that is a good thing, is something that benefits the poor, I suppose. But it seemed particularly outrageous to actually use the term pro-poor development. It's the poor that are being developed, really, isn't it? They're not the beneficiaries; they're the victims.
Correct. Yeah, I agree. And it's like it's usually infrastructure or industrial infrastructure being put into place. It falls within that sort of same idea of you know the well, wow, I can't think of the phrase right now, but basically, poor people are the ones that pay the price for like industrialization. The industry that's still in the United States is only in poor communities. You don't see it in the more wealthier communities or cities. It's all been exported out, and whether it's been exported to other countries or within the United States, it's always on the outer edges. And I think that the Native Americans have experienced that for generations. Being put in, relegated to so-called reservations, and yet, uranium mining or other, fracking or other types of initiatives get put into place conveniently in the same lands that they pushed, Native Americans into. It's a very disingenuous way of operating in the world.
Yeah, and always to say it's for their good. It's for the good of those communities. Everything that happens to them is always for their own good. Because the power concern could never actually be a bad, unpleasant, almost evil entity. You're not allowed to think that for a moment, are we?
Right.
Yeah.
On that, you actually quote is Guston Esteva? Is that how you pronounce his name?
Oh, I don't know. I think so. It sounds about right.
Yeah.
Guston Esteva.
I didn't have to.
Where you say the metaphor of development gave global hegemony to a purely Western genealogy of history, robbing people of different cultures of the opportunity to define the forms of their social life. So that actually goes along the lines with what you were just saying about how, the Native American reservations are often used as, fracking or other types of
extraction,
and industry that hurts them in the long run. But it's all in the name of development, and it's good for the community. So I thought that using that quote was
can you give us a sort of a thumbnail or background on Guston Esteva? I've never heard of him. What is his?
Well, he was one of the contributors to a very useful book which I read. Which actually there's a link to download it in the article, which was called a Dictionary of Development. The Dictionary of Development, or a dictionary, anyway, Dictionary of Development, and which was originally written in 1992, or originally published in 1992, and then they did an updated version with a in 2010, I think it was 2009, with a different preface, updating the overview, but the essays date back 30 years. Really interesting, and you can download it for free from the site which I linked to.
Okay. All right. Good.
Good.
Is
Thank
he
you.
still with us in the physical realm?
Lost the connection there. I can't hear you anymore.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is he still with us in the physical realm?
Oh, I think so. I did look it all up.
Yeah.
It's probably in there somewhere in the article if you look at it.
Right.
All right.
I haven't read anything else that he's ever written. It was just his contribution to this rather excellent book, which has got loads and loads of essays by people who've specialised in analysing this idea of development as a Trojan horse for warfare.
Well, yeah, and along those lines, Julie and I were talking about this on one of our bookmark programs that the Biden administration is really pushing the idea of electric cars, and like electric cars being the answer to global warming and all this. And the New York Times itself published an article, of course, which is hidden behind a paywall that you can't just access, about how the one mine that the Biden administration is looking to reopen to access or extract minerals used for batteries and whatnot in electric cars is actually going to poison the water in an Indian reservation area in the state of Washington and affect both their health and their traditions through basically destroying salmon fishing, or the salmon in their creeks and rivers. And again, this falls within the context of what you were talking about in this article. It's really insidious.
Yes, I agree. That's the right word.
Well, and then to go on to think that that's an okay thing, because it's for the it's to save the world and from climate change and
it's always
well.
And like this whole New Deal for nature-based solutions, and all of this, which is just all about saving nature, conserving nature. That is being planned in parallel or as part of this Great Reset agenda, which really targets Africa particularly. I suppose you probably follow the No Deal for Nature account on Twitter campaign, and then Survival International have got a lot of good information on that. But it's just a new version of what Britain was doing hundreds of years ago. Except that now, at the time of the industrialization of Britain, it was my ancestors who were being thrown off the land by the enclosures in order to produce a workforce for the factories and for the imperial organization, whether the navy and the merchant navy and the administration and policing of the colonies and all the rest of it. We were used as human capital at that stage, and now it's the Africans were used as human, brutal way, in that they were enslaved, obviously, shipped over to the New World,
right,
for a great home of freedom, but now this current empire, which is neither specifically British nor American, is targeting. It wants to throw African people off their land. And in order to use them, I think at the same, both to use the land either for tourism or for resource exploitation, and also to push them into the fourth revolution.
Right. Yeah.
The fourth industrial revolution.
Right. Exactly. There we are. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. Along those lines, I mean, I've been.
I want to talk about global.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, because I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry,
that's okay.
I wanted, so with that in mind, with the the No Deal for Nature and this whole concept, you talk about global shapers. I know what global shapers are. I feel like I am even dealing with global shapers on a very micro level here in our community. Unelected people who are part of school boards and part of municipalities that are making decisions outside of the public's view and outside of the public's will. So I think, when you hear the term global shapers, you often think of, that they are sitting on these high global positions, when really global shapers they could be your local librarian, your school teacher. But could you please give a definition of what you think a global shaper is? You do talk about global shapers in the article, so.
So I missed the end of that.
Okay.
Could you please define global shapers?
All right. Well, that specific term comes from the from the WEF, the World Economic Forum. They have an organisation called the Global Shapers Community. Of course, it's a community. What else would it be?
It always is.
But so they've got. I mean, I wrote about that 2021, I think, in great inordinate detail. But they've just got organisations everywhere in the world, local hubs. But it's supposed to be young people, and I don't think they're all. Well, they're younger than me, but they're not all that young. I don't think so.
Right.
But they're all involved in what I would call dodgy business activities, such as promoting online
Education.
connected to all the usual all the usual corporations and foundations and the rest of it. But the interesting, so that's the WF Global Shapers, and it's headed by the Carlyle Group is involved in it somewhere. You know, it's just like it's just all the usual mafia. It's just pretending to be on a different hat. You know, that's all. It always seems to be the same people, but hiding behind a different facade. But interestingly, I noticed when I was looking at the Commonwealth, there was or is maybe still an organisation called it was the Queen's Shapers. And I didn't go down that particular rabbit hole. I think you're right, Julie, that it's a general. The single agenda that we seem to be up against in their own spheres, whatever those spheres happen to be. It says people have somehow been co-opted by that. I don't know. They're not necessarily even being paid to do that, because they probably think they're doing something very worthy, and they're going to be, they feel that they're going to be thanked by the world for having advanced the cause of
right and
democracy, and all the rest of this waffle that they hide their activities.
Yeah,
true.
Which is
go ahead.
No, and that's where the left has gone so horribly wrong, is that it's swallowed all of that language. It's swallowed all of that agenda, it seems now. They're not all of the left, obviously, but all these sort of mainstream organisations. And it's just, it's just walked into this trap of acting as publicity agents for something which it should be desperately fighting against if it was really what it says it is. That's the great tragedy.
Right.
The empire, it's working for the empire. It's working for the wrong side. Wake up, you people.
Yeah, you mentioned that in there, that like a lot of the people on the left are now these press agents for these initiatives that are coming through.
Right, and the publicity is nothing but the World Economic Forum. I mean, they are, we are of the mindset, at least I am, that even if the World Economic Forum were dismantled and taken apart and it wasn't part of this whole operation, I still feel that, marketing is very effective. Publicity is very effective, and that you would still be able to, affect everybody in one way or another. I feel like the marketing or the World Economic Forum is sort of the idea men behind a lot of these initiatives that are taking place in our local communities. It's coming down through the pike. So with that, I still feel that even if they were dismantled,
these problems would still occur.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, because I don't think that the WEF is obviously key to the rollout of this agenda. It's responsible for promoting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are the sort of basic infrastructure of this nightmare world that they're trying to push us into. But I don't think it's actually. And I don't, although I wrote that article about Klaus Schwab, I don't think that he personally or his organisation is actually the origin of this. But they're just an important agency to advance the agenda.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I've been saying to Julie, I think they're the marketing agency for the billionaire class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on to. Well, we kind of did already talk about the World Economic Forum, and I like how you stay away from terms like globalism or New World Order. We just use the term global capitalism or globalization because we feel that everything that we're experiencing is based on a profit-making scheme so that various corporations can continue to accrue wealth based on the oppression of everyone else. And that's more globalization and not necessarily globalism. And I think people often use these words incorrectly
or interchangeably.
Yeah. Right? Or they just do the default, hey, it's the New World Order. And if I were to try to explain in intelligent terms to my liberal friends who are working in sustainable development models, who work in the nonprofit industry and are part of the problem, if I just came in, with my ranting and raving about the New World Order, they would totally turn me off. You have to speak in the right kind of terms in order to reach these people and plant a seed, so that maybe they can start to think about how they're affecting these kinds of negative changes that we're all experiencing. And so using terms like, capitalism or globalization and, where's your funding coming from? And forcing them to actually go through the steps of identifying like where the problem is, as opposed to just sharing these,
just throwing out these words,
really reactionary or reactive terms. So I think that with this article, you've kept it really like I would feel comfortable giving this article to my corporate friends.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, because there is a problem. As I said earlier, there's this problem with labels that they mean different things to different people. And for one person, the term New World Order explains everything, and for another person, it's just a sort of complete red flag, and they're not going to ever read anything that's got that phrase in it. So.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I often talk about these sort of like throwaway words or phrases that get used a lot. And yeah, sure, they're good thumbnails, but they don't always explain exactly what's going on. And one morning we were doing one of our audio programs, and somebody in the comments kept using a particular term or a word, and I started, speaking back and saying, but think about what that actually means, and walk it down, and let's pull it apart. And instead of just using these thumbnail terms, let's pull it apart and unpack that so that we can understand, where that comes from and how it relates to the context in which we're speaking in general, especially. But so I like you and Julie, I try to avoid using those thumbnails. Yes, they do mean something, and yes, they've been used. But I also feel like a lot of times they're used as sort of red herrings. Mm-hmm. Do you find that often? Do I have to repeat it?
Yeah, sorry, it cut off again now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. So what I find is that these terms like New World Order get used, and even used by the people who are implementing them, right? But I also feel like they often are used as red herrings in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean they could be. Yes, I mean they could be used deliberately so that some people pick them up and use them, and then those people are discredited in the eyes of people who don't like those terms or find them off-putting. Yeah, and it's an oversimplification in a way, because it's just a label. It doesn't explain, does it? It doesn't explain what you mean. And I think you're quite right that we need to unpack the actual content of these agendas that we're looking at, and break it right down and make it exposed to the light of day what is actually happening, if we can. I mean, it's not easy, but that's the task, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
One thing you mentioned one thing you seem to focus on in part 2 of Empire of Hypocrisy is the fact that this is a targeted attempt to hijack the minds of our youth. I'm paraphrasing like the entire part 2, but you really do focus on children. And I would like to ask you, that I do believe that global shapers run the gamut. Global shapers could be anybody, but you specifically focus on children. It feels like, or the youth. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that is something I know. Well, I mean, I was reading I was examining this youth report from the company. Well, that's very important for them, which is why I found myself talking about it. They're very proud of their the number of young people and children that there are within the empire. This is I quote some passages that say that this is their human capital, their demographic dividend or something like that.
Wow.
It's a human. In Asia and Africa as being resources which they can very usefully exploit for profit, and they've sort of constructed a fetish around this by pretending that they're doing all this for the young people, or that it is youth led. I think I counted. Well, I did a search for the term youth led in that document, the youth report, and it was about 40 times or something. I think that's what. Right. Just everything is youth led,
Right.
It's rubbish. Of course, it's not youth led. It's the same thing as this pro-poor development. The idea that it comes from below, and then it's them doing it for them, and it's all positive, rather than they're just being crushed under this mighty jackboot of financial imperialism, which is what's really happening. But they just dress it up, and it's just so typical. It's the world of advertising, isn't it? We all grew up watching adverts. I remember when I was quite a young child, I saw through adverts. I understood that they were just telling lies in order to get us to buy things.
Right.
It's not, especially when the advertising was a lot less sophisticated when I was younger. So,
right.
but it's been the same. It's the same thing. The same thing in all the political parties, and politicians use the same language, the same techniques. Just this smooth facade, smooth exterior, all sugar-coated and glistening and tinsel-wrapped, trying to sell us a sort of, a complete crock of, whatever. It's just.
Well, it's interesting you bring up, advertising and watching it as a kid. It's like, advertising, most of the advertising is aimed at, young people, because that's the demographic they want to, reach, so that they buy things, because they're not, maybe they're not as sophisticated as adults, maybe not, but the whole issue with them focusing on the youth, and this tradition of advertising to the to young people, I think there's a real parallel there.
Sorry, what was the last three words?
The last, I think
we're just agreeing with you.
I'm agreeing with you that there's a real parallel there between advertising to young people, and and then this focus on the youth in these global initiatives. I also see this is something else that you've brought up, is the idea of intersectionality, and I feel like this focus on always showing a girl in a hijab, a little child in a wheelchair, another child of color, and then a white child, and then and it's I see this consistently in across the board. It doesn't matter if it's advertising, if it's some other sort of marketing form, nonprofits, schools, whatever. This is always seen, these little symbols,
right,
of diversity.
Right.
And it's all linked into to impact investment, but also and to the UN SDGs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they but I see it everywhere now. I've started to see it everywhere. It's quite worrying. And I saw once a few years ago, I helped somebody fill in a form, because it had to be in English, for getting funding for a theatre project, and they had to show that they were meeting all these goals, that they were in line with all these. I don't know if they explicitly said the UN SDGs, but that you get a tick. If you talk about the experience of migrants, you get a tick, or if you can mention gender inequality, or all these. I mean, which is not to say that these aren't important issues in themselves. Poverty is one of them. Talk about poverty. Obviously, I'm not in favour of poverty. Quite the opposite. But they're all these. These are all categories for investment. This is what this is all about, I think, and all about the impact investment thing. It's categories, and so they have to create a market for their investments and their speculation.
Right.
And so it's become a corporate ideology, And I see it in films. That's what I was going to say. I watch a film and I think, oh, that's funny. There's always, there always seems to be certain types of themes running through this. And if you wait to the end of the film, you'll see all the foundations and international bodies that have helped fund the film. And I'm sort of starting to see. I'm looking at this from the outside. Perhaps starting to see how this might work. There's more of the shaping going on through a different mechanism. Some of it is through individuals in the community who are shapers, and some of it is through the way that various projects, even cultural projects, are financed. They have to fit in with this infrastructure.
I agree. Yeah, and you see. I think that you are starting to see this sort of across the board approach, and this this conformity that's taking place, and it's through the apparatus of funding for these nonprofit organizations or through cultural projects or what have you.
Right. You are no longer brought into a project, especially a cultural project or an artistic project, based on your own merits and your own talent. You're brought in based on what boxes you've checked off in the corporate memo that was handed to the people who are promoting the project, right?
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's anathema to cultural growth and to having a society that really thrives and shines. And this is where we talk about this word that I don't hear too many anarchists use, but it's called communitarianism, where you are no longer brought into a system based on your own particular talents, but you're brought in based on a mold that you fit that's defined by the nonprofit or the impact investors or the stakeholders or the corporate framework. And so, and to me, that leaves a very dystopian outlook. It's very depressing, especially given the fact that I'm married to a wonderful artist,
Who's that?
and, the talent that seems to come out of him is just, incredible to me. And I've watched him try to share his talent with certain projects, local projects, only to be told, no, or we don't have room for you, or you have to fit into this certain criteria that we manage. And it's really frustrating for the actual creatives out there to try to exist in this particular paradigm that's being presented to us. It's challenging, but it also offers, great opportunities. So, I'm trying to keep a positive outlook on it. But that is kind of where we are right now. I think that another term, and you mentioned this earlier when you were chatting a minute ago, another term that really grabbed me was something called development mafia. And I've always considered sort of what we're experiencing over the last 3 years as sort of a mob-like tactic, where the mob comes in and says, or the mafia comes in and says, it'd be a shame if you didn't follow these rules or whatever. So can you talk a little bit about, I thought it was brilliant that you use that term development mafia, because that just brilliantly depicts where we are right now. So you want to talk about that a little bit? Did you get that?
Not the last bit. Yeah, development mafia. Yeah. Well, that's what they are. Yeah, it is that. What is the difference between a criminal mafia and an official mafia? There isn't one. It's the same. It's just one of them is more successful in passing itself off as something that is on the right side of the law. Where, it's just a mafia that has taken over the the government or the system, isn't it? It's just that it's a bunch of criminals who are now happily sitting behind on the inside of the fortress of law and order rather than on the outside.
Right. Well, and if you think about the mafia, or a mafia-like thinking, and it's like, well, corporations are basically that, right? That's the mafia is a corporation, and corporations are really running roughshod over culture and people, and they have for years and centuries.
Yes, it's getting worse. There's been it's getting worse. I think because there's an increasing convergence between this money, which I because ill-gotten money, and power, so that it's just sort of become one and the same thing. It's very difficult to see any chink of decency there, of anything that isn't contaminated.
Yeah,
that's the reality, isn't it? So, but I don't mean amongst people in general. I mean amongst people in positions of power.
Right.
I wanted to kind of go a little bit of a different place. So when you talk about money, there is, there's all these different opportunities for creating personal wealth that are being presented to us. For instance, digital currency, or not digital currency, but cryptocurrency is offered. I know some people exchange money purely through Bitcoin. Like that's how they operate in the world, through the transaction with Bitcoin. But I feel that, and this goes back before 2020 even, but of course it was accelerated after 2020. I feel that we could refer back to something that Shoshana Zuboff mentioned. Now, I don't lift her up as an expert in anything. I don't quite trust her. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she...
what was the book she wrote?
Surveillance Capitalism.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't read it. Now.
It's, 25,000 pages.
It's a doorstop. Yeah.
It's a huge book. But one of the things that she said was that your inner thoughts are the new money. You are being mined, and you are the money now. So, and this is all through technology, all through surveillance, all through, and then of course it's been accelerated and put on steroids as our DNA is harvested for wealth, through these testing kits that the schools are administering to the children, or that your employer is forcing employees to take. So suddenly we are being harvested. That's what I feel as a creative and somebody who likes to dip into, creative language. Sometimes it really does feel like we are being harvested in order to have someone else gain a lot of profit. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I mean, data was one of the great important elements of the Commonwealth project. Their latest in their youth report. It was all about using data and constructing this impact investment market. It's the sort of way to set. I think it's the way to save capitalism, which is sort of capitalism. Their system. It's not really capitalism. It's like capitalism is a description of the system, isn't it? It's not the actual system. But there is an actual real system behind the label, which is this mafia, which seems easier to talk about a criminal mafia rather than an abstract ideological label, because I don't think they're ideological at all. They're just after power and status, and money has been the way they've achieved that.
Right.
Right.
It doesn't have to be money. It could be something else. It could just be big sticks with which they beat us constantly.
Right.
Hey,
Well, that's what money is, isn't it? I'll tell you.
Don't give them any ideas, Paul.
I've seen that one. They've already thought that one.
Do you think that we are currently in a feudal system or a neo-feudal system existence right now?
So you cut off there. What was the question?
The question was, do you think that we are currently living in a neo-feudal existence?
Well, we're moving close to it, aren't we? We will be if we don't manage to put something in the spokes of this machine and stop it pretty soon.
Okay. And I would say that articles like this, correct. Yeah.
System, aren't they? When they're just ratcheting it up another notch. They aim to intensify it, accelerate it. Whether you can actually draw a line at some particular point and say, right, that's the moment when we've passed officially into new neo-feudalism from advanced disguised imperialism. I don't know. But certainly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We got a little from our side. You cut off a little bit.
A little bit, but we got it.
Let's
Sure,
let's go surfing.
Oh God. So explain in your article. You use the term impact outcome, and it just goes along the lines with this developmental mafia type of process that that's being unleashed on us. Explain. Can you explain in a very simple way for people who may just be hearing you for the first time what you mean when you say impact outcome or human capital? What your definition of that is? I mean, I know what mine is. But what is
yeah. I mean, it's this impact investment, which was originally launched by Sir Ronald Cohen, the Empire theme. Can you still hear me? Yeah. So this basically it's the first step is it's a privatization of social services which would have been provided by the state at one stage, and certainly in Britain anyway. Maybe not so much in the USA. I don't know how things work, but a privatization of that, a way of helping, because state governments don't have any money anymore and they owe billions of dollars and pounds to the banks and so on. So the financiers kindly step in and put the money in up front. And if they achieve, but they've got to see if it's worked or not. And how do you know if it's worked to help somebody who's handicapped and you want to help them sort of cope with their life better? There isn't it's not like a balance sheet like there would be in helping a business. So they need to measure it all. It all has to be measurable, which is why they need everything to be done online and all the time. And children particularly, everything they do, all their education is all online, isn't it now? And it all has to be evaluated, and it's so that they can have an outcome. And the outcome is the key for releasing payments.
right?
For a job well done, and also I'm not an expert in finance at all, but this is what I've come to understand. That is also it's linked in with this speculation. They can speculate on the outcomes, and they bundle up. Apparently, this is how it works. They bundle up people's lives, especially children's lives, because children are going to be around for a while and they've got a complete control over their lives throughout their lives. This is why they're particularly interested. They're not interested in investing in some old duffer like me, because I'm not going to be around for long enough to make any money for them. So, and children are more malleable. They've been brought up to do everything online and to think that's normal. And anyway, so the speculation, they bundle up people's lives as like commodities, I think the term. And they speculate on them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they sell them, and they buy them and sell them. But they have outcomes to know whether the value of this investment, and to turn it all into statistics and figures and value. They call it value. Well, they're creating value. They talk about that a lot about that, and that means creating markets and commodifying everything. From they can create value out of pollution. They can create value out of somebody having psychological problems, poor mental health. Because of COVID, they were rubbing their hands together. I found a passage which definitely suggests that, because COVID had caused so many mental health problems. So that's a market. That's something we can create value out of. So it's just this horrendous vampiric outlook on the world that sees fellow human beings, because presumably these people are human beings who run this. I don't know what else they would be if they're not human beings. So they're saying fellow human beings as objects, and not as people. And you come back to that word insidious. It is entirely insidious to see people like that. But perhaps it's the whole basis of everything that we call imperialism or capitalism or government or whatever. Right. It's always been that maybe to some extent, hasn't it? So.
Well, when you're talking about bundling, these commodities and bundling people's lives, of treating them as commodities, it reminds me of there was a dry run of this, or a dress rehearsal of this through the whole bundling of mortgages back before 2008, before that all crashed. Yeah. And they took things that were normally in the past never invested in the way that they did, and they treated them as commodities rather than other ways of financial entities or mechanisms, whatever, and treated them in a different manner altogether. And we saw what happened with that whole thing, right, in 2008. I just can't wait to see what happens when they when the crash of human capital markets and these
you can be sure that somebody will be betting on that collapse, on that crash.
They're shorting it for sure.
I can almost guarantee you that there are people betting on the collapse. No, what they're betting on are the various markets that human beings need to survive. So they're betting on the collapse of, say, water infrastructure. They're betting on the collapse of this new narrative that's come out now, that baby formula isn't as available for new mothers. So they're betting on the collapse of children's health, you see. And a lot of people don't understand that these shortages, whether they are real or not, the fact is that we are being told that there's a food shortage. We are being told that there's a baby formula shortage because there are people that stand to make great wealth based on that narrative. And so that's what's really going on. So so that you get this mixture of finance and that insidious nature of finance betting on a collapse, mixed with a false propaganda publicized idea of something that may not actually be true. And so that's kind of where we are. We're living in this really strange world of deceit. And, I think probably the best, or at least my favorite portion of your article was part 6, where you do talk about deceit. You want to bring it up one more time?
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Hang on a second.
So, devoted to deceit.
Yeah.
And I want to give you some time to talk about that.
Well, this was the conclusion to the article in question,
Mm-hmm.
where what did I go? Yeah, I'm just trying to think exactly what I said there. Actually,
well, we got. You started talking about the den of greed and corruption in the city of London. Hiding behind the empire have always been the nefarious financial interests historically centered in that great stinking den of greed and corruption, the city of London.
Yeah. And they've always hidden the reality behind it. I think that's what I was saying. Oh yeah, I think I've already mentioned this. Really, it's just this sugar coat to be duped into not, but to actually supporting it and attacking people who criticize it. That if you or I start saying that intersectionality is linked to impact investment, obviously we're just right wing, aren't we? Because
right.
Anybody who's nice supports intersectionality. And what you're saying there is you hate disabled people, and you hate poor people, and you hate gay people, and you hate black people, and that's just it's just like they're the sort of shock troops of the system that are being not willing. I suppose most of them won't be willingly defending the system. They think they're defending something that's good and right.
Right.
But in fact, they're being totally manipulated.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the devotion to deceit that you so eloquently write about in the last portion, which is my favorite portion, because most of the time, it seems on this platform lately, is we are taking apart these deceitful narratives and
breaking them down,
reinterpreting them, and helping people understand what it is that is actually happening, which is another marketing campaign. When you talked about all of those demographics, intersectionality, people of color, the poor, all of these demographics are being invested in, and you have two sides. You have the investors that want to see them go up, and you have the investors that want to see them go down. And so there's this deceit going on. And meanwhile, that demographic itself, as you so eloquently put, is being manipulated. And so I think that's kind of where everybody is right now, in terms of the Great Reset and the COVID narrative, is they all realize that they're being manipulated. Even if they're on the right side of history, they're being manipulated. So I wanted to, to tell you that part really spoke to me,
Good, yeah. I know, I agree with your comments. Obviously, it's it's surreal, isn't it, to be living in this world. When you think that Guy Debord was writing about the spectacle, how long ago? 50 years ago or so, and at that time, it seemed to him to be this maze of lies and falsity, and how that has got worse over the last half century is just unbelievable. I just think that it must be close to some sort of cracking point where either we all die in a horrible or just nobody believes in this deceit anymore. Obviously, I hope it's the latter.
I do too.
I think we're there.
I think, and to kind of back up just a bit before we kind of close things up, I think you mentioned the term fintech in your article. I don't know if you did or not. It's something that I've been hearing a lot lately.
Yes, it was mentioned. It was one of the appropriate jobs that was deemed an appropriate job for people in the global south, so the young people, was to drag them off the land.
Yeah, and the other thing about fintech is not only is it like good jobs or the appropriate jobs as it were, it's also a trend that Julie and I have been seeing for a while, and we were talking about the financialization of people through back channels, but it's also in the foreground as well, where personal loans and the emphasis on your credit score, and if you don't have credit, you're really not considered to be anyone. At least that's what's happening in the U.S. When we visited Sweden about 4 or 5 years ago, there were billboards for personal loans, and they were aimed at young people who were still probably dealing with, student loans or whatever. Or if they weren't dealing with student loans because they were living in Sweden, they were trying to, entice people to take out personal loans to finance whatever it was in their life that they needed to finance. Because advertising needs to continue to exist, and the shilling of products, unnecessary products, needs to exist. So why not, give people money so that they can buy these things? Oh, and then at a interest rate as well. So,
of course,
and so it's a very again, we're going to go back to that I word, the insidiousness of it all. Whereas they're getting you, coming, and they're getting you. It's a cliche, they get you coming and they get you going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Totally.
I want to just, before we close out, we close down, or we end this conversation, which I've really enjoyed, despite some of the technical issues, the feedback and things. How's life? How's life for you? Like, what's the weather like? Did you get that?
How's life? Did you say? It cut off
Yeah.
at the crucial. Okay. Oh, for me, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, physically, and I live in a nice part of the world with, and I've got some good friends I've made here. Over the 2 years, actually, I've found some. We find each other in these times, and
Yes.
so I've made some good new friends, in fact, and.
Good.
I mean, we're all wondering what's going to happen next, obviously. But
Right.
for the moment, the sun's shining, and
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, we've noticed spring is actually being allowed to happen here this year. Last year it was very odd weather, and we were starting to get that same pattern where it was like extremely cold, and then 2-3 days later extremely hot, and it's kind of leveled out. And I feel like those powers that be that I feel are manipulating these things are paying attention to other things right now.
Right.
That they can't keep their fingers in all the pots going on. So
Right.
So we're getting decent weather and decent things happening here as well. We feel that if you find yourself outside of the paradigm, you can kind of sort of create your own little force field around you, and find, like you said, find like minds and people who you agree with, and that we're all wondering what's next, but we're able to make a nice life for ourselves, as it were.
Yeah, carry on living in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah, being here now. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm very curious, before we say goodbye. I'm very curious. Is everything normal? Like, can you go to a restaurant or go see a concert or go enjoy some culture without having to either, wear a mask or
Prove that you've taken a shot?
Yeah, for the moment, yeah. I mean, I don't know. There've been elections happening here, so I suspect they might have just sort of put it on pause until after all the elections are finished. But
Right.
for the moment, yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well,
Yeah.
it's the same here too. Things are pretty normal, but we're very aware of what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
You know, as you are as well.
Yeah. So between the lawsuits and the court rulings that are finally coming around, I think that things are kind of leveling out. I think also sales quotas have been made. So that's another reason things have backed off a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to anticipate anything, isn't it? At the moment,
It is.
You just don't really know. We're feeling our way every week. You have to try and feel your way through some new strange occurrence which has been thrown into the mix.
Well, certainly we've noticed that. I mean, the latest trend that we've noticed are trucks crashing into buildings. We had 2 incidents here in our community, and we've been hearing about them from our friends and reading about them in other places around the country. So it's the same pattern. A pickup truck or a truck crashes into a house or a place of business.
Isn't that weird?
I don't know what to make of that now.
Well, last year we saw these unidentified shooters just showing up, shooting off a few rounds and then disappearing. This year we're seeing trucks crashing into buildings.
Mm-hmm. There's always something.
Something to do with impact, maybe impact of a truck.
Well,
there you go.
I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I really do. I think that, maybe we'll hear that trucks are leaving too much of a carbon footprint now. So we need to no longer make trucks or something like that.
Or we have to make them electric or whatever. Yeah.
So these are signals that, are things that we should pay attention to, but not be ruled by, not be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little message that they're fielding out there. It's a trial balloon. They're going to see how people respond to the random shootings or the trucks crashing into buildings or the fireworks displays, that go on and on and on, which is, I don't know if you've experienced anything like that in France, but in the United States,
in 2020,
especially in 2020 and 2021, and now coming in, into 2022, there's always these micro events that take place. It's just, it's part of the theater.
Yeah, I'm sure it's that.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you, Paul, for taking time out of your day. I'm glad we were able to coordinate this, and I hope it's not too late where you are. Good.
Thanks very much for having me on again so soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Really nice to see you, and I'm glad to see you smiling, and I'm glad to read your latest. And you've done so much for people, and we just want to acknowledge that. Yeah. Thank you for coming on.
So for those of you who haven't yet, go out and go to Winter Oak. I will post the links in the show notes. So look for those, winteroak.org.uk, and you can find articles from there. And the latest Empire of Hypocrisy is a really good read. And then the two books we talked about. So we'll put links to those as well. So again, thank you for all your work and for coming on to Pullquote.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. All right. Well, that was another great conversation. This is what I love about Pullquote is it's a conversation. We get to, exchange ideas. And despite the drawbacks of the technology, sometimes
depending on where people are in the world, sometimes the feed isn't great, but I think we were able to manage it pretty well.
It's interesting too, because what we find is that when we do these shows on our end, we're seeing the glitches,
right?
But you folks out there are not seeing them. So the Cindy Sheehan interview we did a few months back was really hard for us. But you guys saw something really amazing. So we were, or at least it was clear, is what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
So compared to what we saw. So
Right.
hopefully,
hopefully everything comes out okay in the end.
Yeah. Hopefully your experience was clean and without glitches. So
right.
Anyway.
So tune in for more Pullquote. We will let you know.
Yeah. We don't have anything scheduled right now, so it's sort of going on a little break.
We have some ideas, though.
But we have some ideas, and we're going to reach out to those people and bring them on. But in the meantime, if you have some ideas, do send them to us, info@book-of-hours.com, and we'll look into that and try to put those people on.
And I want to thank, we both want to thank the Rockfin supporters as well as Patreon, and for those who make personal donations as well. It's because of you that we can keep going. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, we will see you again next time on Pullquote.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Pullquote is made possible by our patrons and supporters. You can help us continue to do the work that we do by becoming a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours. Join Rockfin or leave us a tip at rockfin.com/bookofhours. Or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/bookofhours. Thank you.